We take a look back at the loss to the Chargers on Sunday, closing out Week 13 before we officially turn the page to the Denver Broncos. Plus, what is it that Pete Carroll needs to be the head coach he was expected to be when hired by the Silver and Black? That plus more on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for December 2nd, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one sports podcast network. Of course, we're very proud of that, and we're very proud of the fact that this show grows each and every day. You come to this show as your first listen each and every day, and, you know, your go-to show, and we do appreciate that in a major way. It means a lot to us. So thank you off top, Raider Nation, for that, and also thank you, big ups to my guy, Ari, who does a fantastic job behind the scenes, making sure we look good and sound good by way of the YouTube page. So shout out to Ari. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well on Twitter at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, as many of you do, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line for you at 707-654-4693. I've said it many times, but I want to make sure to reiterate it. If your call or text doesn't get on, it's not because we're screening you or we don't like you or we're avoiding your question or whatever purposely. It's just we get a lot. We get a ton of feedback, and unfortunately with the show and the length that it has to be now, it used to be one of those where I'd accidentally go 45 minutes and it was okay, but we can't do that now. For multiple reasons, the show's got to be as close to 28 minutes as possible, so we try to do that, and still on the podcast version, it still ends up going about 33, 35 minutes, and Ari has to work his magic to get it to 28 minutes by way of the YouTube page. So just want to make sure everyone knows that if your call or text doesn't make it, it's not for any of those reasons. Also, every once in a while, I won't get multiple calls and texts that have to do with the same thing, just so I can try to get a variety on. So that's kind of a little bit of taking the, a peek behind the curtain, kind of letting you know how the sausage is made. But we will hear from you as we close out the show, calls and texts in segment number 3, as we normally do. Segment number 2, Robert Turbin, former Seattle Seahawks running back, former Super Bowl champ running back, is part of the Indianapolis Colts as well. He joined my radio show on Monday, Unnecessary Roughness on Raider Nation Radio 920, and he gave us a thought on what he believes that Pete Carroll needs to have in order to be a successful head coach for the Silver and Black. So you'll hear from Robert Turbin, and we'll speak on what he had to say. That'll be in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, and it's really about giving some props to a couple of standout members of the Raiders. We'll do that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show. That's FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So as much as we had to say about the game on Sunday and the loss 31-14 to the LA Chargers, dropping the Raiders' overall record to 2-10, and now have lost 6 games in a row. And they've lost 10 games in a row in the AFC West, which obviously is something that they can't have. They have another AFC West opponent coming up on Sunday in the Denver Broncos. They got to find a way to win games in the division. Had a lot to talk about and really didn't give that much props to the guys that deserve it. We talked about Max Crosby and his performance. We talked about Brock Bowers and his couple touchdown catches and the one-handed catch that was incredible, but really didn't give you a deep dive into what they really did. So I want to go ahead and take a few minutes to do that right now. Max Crosby had 2 sacks, 4 tackles for a loss in Week 13. Crosby, who has 23 tackles for a loss in 2025, is the 5th player since 2000 with at least 20 tackles for loss in 3 seasons, joining Pro Football Hall of Famers DeMarcus Ware did in 4 seasons, Jaron Allen in 4 seasons, as well as J.J. Watt in 4 seasons. Aaron Donald had 3. Pretty good stinking company when you're Max Crosby and you're talking about the company of DeMarcus Ware, Jared Allen, J.J. Watt, and Aaron Donald. 3 of those guys in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Aaron Donald will be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and Max Crosby is trying to work his way there as well. So really good company. They go on to say, and this is all by way of NFL communications, Crosby has 76 career games with a tackle for loss, tied with Aaron Donald, 76 games for the second most games with a tackle for loss by a player in his first 7 seasons since 2000, trailing only Pro Football Hall of Famer DeMarcus Ware with 83. So we know every time Max Crosby hits the field, we know what we should expect from him, right? He's up to 8 sacks on the season. Is it where he wants to be? No, but the team is not where they want to be either, sitting there at 2-10. But Max is always going to give you everything that he has. You could always appreciate the effort and the way that he drives and pushes his team to try to be as great as possible, the leadership. And really, I got to give Max Crosby credit for all the way that he's grown since he came into the league a handful of years ago, back in 2019, right? He was a guy that was a pure edge rusher. He was a guy that was really going off of natural ability, just raw talent, and he's really evolved himself into one of the premier edge rushers. Is there still more parts of his game that he'd like to, continue to grow? Sure, but we've seen him take some of those steps this year, including creating turnovers, getting tip balls at the line of scrimmage, even coming up with an interception, getting a strip sack. I mean, those kind of plays, something we said a long time that Max Crosby hasn't had enough of those. He's actually had plenty of those this year, so it's good to see him continue to evolve his game. Now on to Brock Bowers. His second touchdown of the game that he had on Sunday, the one-handed catch, 160th career reception. He's got a lot of different accolades, right? A ton of them, but this one really stood out to me. 160th career reception, the first tight end in NFL history with 160 catches to his first 2 seasons. The only other non-wide receiver to do that all time, Christian McCaffrey with 187, Alvin Kamara 162, and Reggie Bush 161. That's from Raiders PR, and they tweeted out a bunch during the game of different, little nuggets on Max and nuggets on Brock Bowers and nuggets on Geno Smith. But that really stands out to me. That is some elite company right there, and especially to know that he's the only tight end to do it, and he's amongst running backs and guys that play dual roles for their teams. Christian McCaffrey, we know what he means to the 49ers. Alvin Kamara, when he was at the top of his game with the Saints, we know what he meant, and obviously Reggie Bush also with the Saints, we know what he meant to that team and helped them win a Super Bowl. So I just think that is some elite company that Brock Bowers is with, and we know that he is a blue chip player. And for the Raiders, what they're trying to build and who they're trying to build around are those blue chip players. Max Crosby, already talked about him. Brock Bowers, obviously he's a blue chipper. I think Ashton Genty's a blue chipper, but if I said he was right now, I'd just be going off assumptions, right? And not based off anything that we've seen. The production is not there, where Brock Bowers, even though he was on a bad team last year, was still able to succeed. And you saw how great he really was his rookie year, and you thought, man, this guy is quarterback proof, right? And he's continuing to show that. And the only thing that slowed him down at all this year, just think about the numbers he would have if he didn't miss games this year, right? Even on Sunday, he only had 4 targets, right? I mean, he had 2 touchdown catches, but only had 4 targets. He's a guy that should be getting 10 targets a game. But to do that, to get him 10 targets, to get Genty, 20 touches, they've got to possess the ball. And unfortunately for the Raiders, they didn't possess the ball enough. They only had it for about 25 minutes and 48 snaps. So that's just not enough. They're going to have to get their snap increase up on offense to get guys like Brock Bowers going and getting busy and getting guys, Ashton Genty, the touches that they're going to need. I mean, really, I look at 3 dudes. A.J. Cole's another guy that's a blue chip player as the punter, but that's really who the Raiders have to continue to build around. Some of the young guys, we're still wait and see type situation with them. Caleb Rogers, even though he only played 17 snaps, he did really good as a rookie. Finally got an opportunity to get on the field as the right guard. He was splitting time with Mafi. Pete Carroll said on Monday that he expects them to continue to split reps like that, and that's fine. Whatever they feel like they need to do. But in the 17 snaps that Caleb Rogers had, he was really good. And according to Pro Football Focus, which again I say is not the end-all be-all, but it does kind of give you an idea, kind of, it's a reference point. You can check what you feel like your eyes already saw. Highest rated offensive lineman for the Raiders in Week 13, Caleb Rogers. He got 17 snaps. I'd love to see him get a little bit more. But again, if they're just hell-bent on having to split their reps with Mafi, so be it. But Caleb Rogers is going to have to take advantage when he can. And hopefully he's a guy that at the end of the season I'm saying, hey, man, that's an offensive lineman you can really build around. You know what you have in Colton Miller. I believe we know what they have in JPJ, right? He's just not available right now. So, hopefully they can start to put this offensive line together where you can have a solid unit. I think that they need a new center. They're going to need at least one new guard and potentially a right tackle as well. And at some point, they're going to have to replace their left tackle. Colton Miller is not going to be there forever. So they've got some work cut out for them when it comes to their offensive line. But so far, so good. In 17 snaps, small sample size, Caleb Rogers did a really good job. Coming up in segment number 2, what is Robert Turbin? Super Bowl champ running back, played for Pete Carroll there in Seattle. He's been on this show, been on my radio show when Pete Carroll got hired, talked about what he was going to do with this team. He joined my radio show on Monday, and I thought he had some interesting things to say. So I just got a couple minutes of what he had to say from that conversation. You'll hear that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that's FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads, money lines adjust instantly. Player props updates as guys heat up. You can bet the next touchdown, scores, drive results, totals, and a whole lot more. It keeps you locked in every snap, every drive, every possibility. So, if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game that moves fast, and so can you. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want you to hear from a guy who played for head coach Pete Carroll, because right now I'm trying to answer questions, and I feel like I have more questions than I have answers. So I try to reach out to people that I feel like have a better sense of what's going on, what could be possibly going on, and more importantly for the Raiders, what is going wrong as they're sitting there at 2-10. And I remember when Pete Carroll got hired as the head coach for the Raiders, Robert Turbin was on my radio show, and he was really high on what Pete Carroll was going to do. Now, by no means did he think that the Raiders were going to be some playoff team that was going to threaten to take the AFC West from the Chiefs. Wasn't that. But it was similar to me. Hey, man, this team's going to win 8 games. They're going to turn this culture around. They're going to be trending in the right direction. Well, here you are after 13 weeks. They've got 2 wins. Right, they'll be lucky to get the 4 wins that the Raiders got in 2024. They'll be lucky to achieve that this year because their schedule is really tough the rest of the way. So I wanted to have him on my show, and I did on Monday, just to kind of reiterate and rehash on what has gone wrong. And he had some interesting little nuggets to say about Coach Carroll and what he, that feels like has gone wrong, the biggest disconnect with the Raiders this year. To year 1 under head coach Pete Carroll. Check it out.
Well, I think there's a number of things that have happened, that have transpired behind the scenes. And listen, my expectation, I didn't think the Raiders were going to, come in and right away dominate the AFC West by any stretch of the imagination. What I did expect, though, was Pete Carroll to have an organized function within the organization that was going to show some signs of growth. And I'll have to admit, you haven't seen signs of that so far, but the missing element to that is the first part of what I said, an organized system. And I knew really from the beginning, the one question mark that I had was, okay, you're bringing in Chip Kelly to be your offensive coordinator. I don't even think these guys like each other. But I'm thinking, okay, maybe Pete is broadening his horizon. Perhaps he's, making somewhat of a transition in his philosophy, trying new things to try to keep up with the Joneses, per se, in terms of some of the new schemes that are being developed in the NFL. And it turns out that, rivals will remain rivals a lot of times, and it just doesn't work, okay? And that connection obviously no longer exists with the Raiders. And so when you look at it and you ask, okay, what's happened with the Raiders, it's really that. Yes, there's a lack of personnel there, but you could have great personnel. But if the folks behind the scenes, the guys who are calling plays, the guys who are putting together the game plan, the guys who are drafting and wanting to get guys out of free agency, if those aren't connected, then you're not going to have any type of success on the field anyway.
No, you're exactly right, and that's what we've been talking about quite a bit. And and I know Pete Carroll has the resume that says that he knows how to do it, but if everything is not aligned and everyone's not on the same page, you've been part of a Super Bowl winning team, so you know how difficult it is to get that done. I feel like that this is a battle that this team, this organization, cannot win if they're not all rowing in the same direction.
And Pete Carroll is not going to be able to have success if he doesn't have more autonomy. I don't know how much decision making Mark Davis is having in terms of personnel and players. We've talked about maybe how much Tom Brady is involved. But the truth of the matter is this. Pete Carroll's been doing this a lot longer than Tom Brady, especially when it comes to front office and having to build and put together a team. Tom is the greatest quarterback of all time, but he's never had any success from the seat that he's sitting in right now. And it sounds like he's been pretty involved in terms of some of the decision-making. Chip Kelly being one of those choices, right? Passing up on Shedeur Sanders being another choice. So if the Raiders want to have success, I think there's an element and a space there where they're going to have to give a little bit more autonomy to Pete Carroll and allow him to do his thing.
The offensive line has struggled in a major way. Geno's been sacked a ton of times. Genty doesn't really have any holes. And so a lot of people have questioned Brennan Carroll, who's the offensive line coach. Are there going to be some tough decisions have to be made? Do you think that conversation is going to come up if he's going to be retained as the O-line coach next year?
I think, yeah. I mean, listen, Pete's going to make some tough choices. He's already had, he got rid of Midge, the special teams coordinator. He was my coordinator in Indianapolis, by the way, when I played for the Colts. Obviously, Chip Kelly's gone now. So there will be some tough choices. Don't expect him to let go of his own family, though. Okay,
right.
That's taking it a little bit too far. The one thing I will say, though, is when you look at the latter years of him in Seattle, one of the areas that was continuously not up to par was the offensive line. And so here it is again. The Raiders have never struggled. I mean, if there's been any strength in the Raiders over the last decade, their offensive line is always usually pretty good. So philosophically, there's something there that I think Pete needs to correct in order to ensure that he has a strong offensive line.
Interesting nuggets right there, I thought, from Robert Turbin. Again, a Super Bowl champ, played with the Colts, played with the Seahawks, knows Pete Carroll, very familiar with what he brings to the table. And he has a lot of belief in him and still believes that he could be the Raiders head coach next year. But he's going to need the power, right? Or as Robert Turbin said, the autonomy to be able to make the decisions, which goes back, right? All roads lead back to the same conversation that we've had a few times here on who's the decision maker, right? Everyone's got to be on the same page. Everyone's got to row in the same direction. Like whatever kind of cute saying that you want to say is what it's got to be. And it hasn't been that way. And you heard what Robert Turbin had to say about Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll, right? That was his big shock about the whole process that the Raiders were going through, is that he said, I didn't even think that they liked each other, right? And all of a sudden, here they are, one's the head coach and one's the offensive coordinator, and the offensive coordinator sounds like he got hired by a guy that's above Pete Carroll. So how is that going to work, right? It goes back to the conversation of stability in the organization, and it's been anything but stability. But again, that was just my conversation I was having here on the show on Monday. But then Robert Turbin, a guy who's been there, done that, and has been, working under head coach Pete Carroll, kind of reiterates what he needs to have. I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the season. I'd be lying to you if I said that I knew Pete Carroll was going to be back in 2026. I know how I feel about one-and-done coaches. I'm not a big fan of it. But I also know that if they're going to continue with this process and they're not going to allow Pete Carroll to actually be Pete Carroll, then it might be the best case scenario for everybody involved. With that being said, whoever they bring in next, they're going to have to allow the process to be built the correct way, right? The process has got to start at the top and work its way down, right? And it can't be any arranged marriages. And it's funny that when Robert joined my radio show and after the conversation, we had a caller call in and say, well, if that's how it is, then why did Pete Carroll take the job? I said, because he wanted to coach. He wanted to be a head football coach, right? And sometimes you do stuff that you don't necessarily want to do, or circumstances that you don't necessarily want to be a part of to do what you want to do. And my perfect example was, like, for me particularly, I'm a Bay Area guy. I'm a West Coast dude. I went to Waco, Texas. That wasn't on my bingo card. I wasn't thinking that, hey, man, my goal is to get to Waco. It wasn't the goal. And that's not a disrespect to Waco, Central Texas, or anything. It was actually the best decision I ever made, right? And sometimes things work out like that for you. Sometimes, what you don't see as a positive turns into be a huge positive. It worked out fantastic for me. But I didn't know that when I took the job. I just took the job in Waco because I wanted to do a job in radio. And it wasn't even sports. And here we are all these years later, right? That was 2010. It's 2025. Clearly that decision I made in 2010 to get on a train and ride from Fresno, California to Texas was the best thing I ever did. If I didn't, I'm not here today. I'm not here doing what I want to do today. I might still be working at FedEx delivering packages. So sometimes you do things that you don't necessarily want to do and trust that you're going to make the best of that scenario. And I can imagine Pete Carroll, with all the skins on the wall that he has, the resume he has as a head football coach, say, you know what? This is less than ideal, but I can make it work. I'm a good enough head coach. I can make it work. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out to the point where they'll say, hey, man, hey, you can make more decisions, right? Go ahead. Whatever's going through his head. I understand why he took the job. But obviously, going back to what Robert Turbin said, he needs to have more power, more control, more decision-making ability. And it doesn't sound like he does. And obviously a lot of people have been talking about Brennan Carroll, and you heard what Robert had to say about that. And you think he's going to fire his son. He ain't going to do that, right? A lot of people get mad because we haven't asked the question, how come you haven't fired your son? What's he going to say? He's my son. I mean, I asked you the question. Would you fire your son? Probably not. I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't fire mine. I also wouldn't hire him, right? Because I wouldn't want to put myself in that position because that's a tough position to be in. But I can't imagine Pete Carroll saying, hey, yeah, you got to go. And look, that might be part of the negotiation or even conversation that's had at the end of the season. Hey, Pete, we want you back, but he can't coach the offensive line, right? You want to come back, we're going to have to move on from Brennan. We're going to have to move on from Nate if that's the scenario, right? Based off who the offensive coordinator is, they're going to be able to bring in their offensive line coach. If they want Brennan, cool, they can keep him. But if they don't, we got to move on from him. That might be part of the conversation, and Pete's going to have to make a tough decision then. But just to come out, and he said it the other day when we asked him, do you anticipate moving on from any other coordinators? Which is basically the same thing as saying, hey, do you plan on firing your coach who is a coordinator? He's the offensive line coach. He said, no, we've already had enough. We've already had enough in season. Not going to do that again. Remember, he's not a guy that fires coaches in season. He hadn't fired any coordinators in 14 seasons in Seattle in season. He had never done it. He fired 2 coordinators with the Raiders in 17 days. So he said he's not doing it. But I thought that was a good little peek behind the scenes and just kind of continue with the conversation that we've been having about who's making the calls, who's in charge, who's not in charge, who's everybody reporting to. And I don't think anyone has the answer of what that is. The Raiders, if they want to be successful, they've got to decide who's going to be the man, right? Like a president of football operations, who's going to be the guy that's going to say, hey, we're going to draft this guy. We're going to have this as our identity of the team. We're going to go in this direction with the quarterback. This is the head coach that we were going to bring in. He's going to bring in this guy. They need to have that guy. Who is that going to be? Until they decide who that's going to be, the Raiders organization is going to be kind of a battleship offense or a battleship team. They pick a number, pick a letter, and hope it hits. And if it does, great. If it doesn't, well, try another one. That's just what it's going to be. So thought that was some good information and good listen right there. Just part of the conversation I had with Robert Turbin on my radio show on Monday. But what's on your mind? Your calls and texts will close out the show. 707-654-4693. We hear from you next. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about another great sponsor we have on the show, and that is Aura Frames. The holidays are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is a gift that delivers every time. It's not just something you wrap, it's a way to share memories, because Aura isn't your average picture frame. You could preload the frame with photos before gifting it, so when they plug it in, the memories are already there, no apps to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. Grandparents, parents, newlyweds, anyone who loves photos, this is for you. Endless uploads of pictures and 30-second videos throughout the Aura app. Add a personalized message right inside the frame so the gift feels thoughtful the moment it is open. Package comes gift ready, no price tag, no wrapping needed. Huge win. It's a holiday gift that actually gets used, not forgotten in a drawer or regifted. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. That's Aura Frames, AURA Frames.com, promo code LOCKEDON. This deal is exclusively to listeners, and frames will sell out fast. So order yours now to get in on the time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions do apply. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Got a couple lengthy texts and a call, so we'll try to get as much in as possible. We'll hustle up and take this text from Miller Raider. What's up, Q? Not sure what to think about this team anymore. My coach in high school told us that confusion causes chaos, which is what we've seen out of this organization since Gruden left. After hearing the reports from the podcast last week with Tom Pelissero, it shows no one is on the same page. Mark Davis, Tom Brady, and the other high-ups in the organization need to figure it out, what they want this football team to look like, and then pass it along to Spytek or whoever's at GM to build that vision. It can't be, hey, let's hire Carroll and partner him with Chip Kelly and hope for the best. That's a conflict of interest and major red flags. Too much confusion is within the coaching ranks, and this is a result of that. If the ownership has a vision, pass that down to the GM, have him make the hires and fires to build that vision the way that there is no confusion, eliminating most of the chaos. It's like you said, Q, the proper way to build this hasn't existed in a long time, if ever. The Pete Carroll experiment is over after this year. If they didn't trust him to hire his OC, they probably don't trust and support his offensive vision. Therefore, moving on for a young offensive mind to build around with a young QB makes the most sense right now. Hopefully they get this figured out. I mean, if you look at our team, it's pretty much stripped down to the nuts and bolts. Let's start the rebuild. Thanks for all you do, Q. Miller, Raider, out. I don't think I could disagree with too much of that, right? I mean, for every reason that I've mentioned for multiple days now, and even hearing what Robert Turbin had to say. Now, if you do trust Pete Carroll to be the guy, then let him actually be the guy and make the decisions on who he's hiring as his OC so they can share the same vision, so he's not sending messages through the media about, oh, yeah, he ain't calling the plays now. He ain't calling the plays. Like, I will never get that out of my mind. He ain't calling the plays now. He looked at me a little side-eyed like, you know, you watch your mouth now. You know I know your mama, right? I mean, it's one of those. That's what it sounded like. But, yeah, I mean, look, they've got to be able to trust him. If they don't trust him, there's no reason to have him. You're absolutely right, 100%. Miller Raider, thanks so much for the text. I appreciate you. Up next is a call from Priest in the Bay. He's calling to talk about the team and the fact that everything takes time to build and get on the right track and what must happen moving forward. Here's Priest in the Bay.
Well, Q, this is Priest in the Bay Area. Listen, everything you said is correct. The problem is, Q, this takes time. Everybody wants to see the rookies play. What do you think is going to happen when they go out there? They put Caleb Rogers in the game, and he couldn't handle it. So they had to go to this kid, Murphy. What do we think is going to happen with rookies playing? And that's the issue. We as fans don't want to suffer what it takes to get this team on the right path. That is time. You have to give a coach, a head coach, a chance to figure out who can play and who can't. And as he pieces things together, it's going to look clunky and ugly. I don't care about this blame game stuff. You need to have one man in charge. Let him get his coaches, and then you'll see where the problems lie. But if you're being dictated to from the top, you're going to see some conflict. If a coach has the opportunity to get his own coaches and put his own players, he has complete autonomy over the roster, then he can see who to replace where. And so what I'm saying, what Lincoln has been trying to say, it's going to take time. They have to get their lumps. When he puts players in the offensive line, he's doing it for a reason. But if he's arguing with another guy, then you won't see you won't see his plan come to fruition. I'm saying, let Pete handle it. Let him fix it. It's going to take time. And we as fans have to sit back and see what the results are. Then judge it. But what we do is when we lose a game and everybody throws up their hands and says, Pete sucks. Pete doesn't suck. What sucks is this organization. It's a mess. And somebody needs to be allowed to fix it.
Priest, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate you. And I agree 100% with it's going to take time, right? I mean, I was very adamant about the Raiders going to be an 8-win, 9-win team this season. And a lot of folks thought I was crazy. Oh man, you're settling for less. You're settling for mediocrity. When in reality, I knew it was going to take time. The problem is that it seems like it's going to take a lot longer than I expected. And it's not just Pete Carroll calling the shots. Like I said, I expected a Pete Carroll ran team to look a certain way, sound a certain way, play a certain way. And now we're finding out that this is not just a Pete Carroll-led team. This is a Chip Kelly / Tom Brady / Mark Davis / you know what I mean, John Spytek. Like, there's so many cooks in the kitchen, and Thanksgiving just passed by. I mean, I use this example on my radio show. Could you imagine if 5 or 6 cooks are in the kitchen trying to make one turkey be good? Oh, hey, man, no, this is a recipe that my grandmama used to use. So let me show you this way. All right, well, I got my recipe that I use, and it's great. My family loves it. Well, what about this recipe that I looked up online? Like 4, 5, 6 different ideas. Guess what that turkey's going to do? Be bad. Oh, no, I want to fry the turkey, right? After all that's said and done, oh, no, we got all these recipes. Let's go fry that bad boy. It ain't going to work. It's going to be bad, and that's what has been going on with the Raiders. So if they decide that they're going to actually trust Pete Carroll to build this thing in his vision and set it up so when he's ready to move on, the next guy could take over and be pretty seamless, cool. But it doesn't seem like that's the plan. And that is the biggest problem as far as I'm concerned. So until they solve that issue, and who's going to be like the head of football operations and call the shots and share the vision and ask his coaches to go out there and execute it, there's going to be a problem, and it's going to take longer than any of us expected. Thanks for the call. Appreciate you. Got a text here from Rose Park Raider, who actually texted in last week, and again, one of the texts that I didn't see, but he called me out on Twitter, and I guess he thought I was avoiding it or thinks I'm avoiding the text. I'm not. I just didn't see it. So I went back and found it, and I do appreciate you giving me the exact date that you sent the text in because I found it. So here we go. This is from Rose Park Raider. Hey, Q. The other day, Amy Trask was on CBS Sports HQ, where she suggested Tom Brady's business partner and sportscaster Jim Gray is. And these are my words. Overly involved behind the scenes and is an impediment to Pete Carroll being able to execute his vision as a head coach. Trask obviously is still well-sourced. This is obviously a pro-Carroll narrative. What, if anything, are you hearing about this? What is Jim Gray's role? So far, to me, it appears there are too many cooks in the kitchen. Earlier in the season, Carroll and Kelly each talked about speaking with Tom Brady every week. Sounds like Jim Gray is chiming in, too. I hear that this dynamic could end up making the Raiders' head coaching job and even the GM position post-Spytech less attractive, which is very problematic. Mark Davis sought to avoid earlier in his tenure as sole owner as he gradually went more hands-off. That's from Rose Park Raider. Yeah, and thanks for the text and thanks for your patience. I appreciate you. And, yeah, I don't know, and I'll try to get Amy on the show and maybe further explain. I've seen Jim Gray around the organization like twice. And the last time I saw him around the organization, so funny that this is brought up, was the day that Chip Kelly got fired. So the loss that they had against the Cleveland Browns, that was when I was standing there waiting to get into the locker room with Paul Gutierrez from Raiders.com, longtime ESPN writer. We were standing there talking about accountability and who had to, be the, I don't want to say fall guy, but somebody had to be accountable for what was going on. And that's when we saw Jim Gray. Normally he's in with Mark Davis, and we never see him. We saw him that day walking around the bowls and bowels of the stadium. And then when, I got home and a couple hours after that, we found out Chip Kelly got fired. So I've heard that he has a major say in it. I know that he's a longtime guy that wanted to be part ownership of the Raiders. I know he helped orchestrate Tom Brady being a part of the minority ownership. But Rose Park, I literally would be lying to you if I said what his involvement was and what his role is. I don't work for the Raiders, so I don't get inside information in the building. I get the same information that is given to me at press conferences. I talk to players, this, that, and the other. So Mark Davis isn't running anything by me. Guys in the building aren't saying anything to me. So, again, I have way too much respect for you and anyone else to make up something and act like I know exactly what's going on with these guys. I know that Jim Gray is part of, the reason why the Hall of Excellence is at Fontainebleau, whereas Tom Brady's, Hall of Excellence that he has there on display, so much of the great sports memorabilia. I know that Jim Gray is heavily involved, with Tom Brady and his endeavors, and I've seen him at Aces games. But as far as the everyday, Amy Trask would know probably a lot more than me because she's being told by other people. I mean, she's not around the building, but I know that she has a lot of people probably still in the building that she has a lot of respect for, and they have a lot of respect for her. So I will never question what Amy Trask has to say. I think she'll probably forget more than I'll ever know. And that's just me being straight up. But I'll try to get her on and get her explanations and see what she has to say, and we'll go from there. But that's really all I can do. But thanks, like I said, for your text, and thanks for your patience. Got a call from Raider 783. We'll get on tomorrow. A text from Mr. Crisp, I should say. No gangbanging here, but text from Mr. Crisp and Raider T in Long Beach by way of L.A. Is that right? Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, we'll get that call on tomorrow as well. So we're trying to muscle through it, trying to hammer through it. We'll start to turn the page sooner rather than later, going to week 14 of the Denver Broncos as they're on their way to Allegiant Stadium, and we'll see how that all plays out. But until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.